In the beginning, the jumbled words from the girl speaking are because English isn't her first language in the novel, and so she isn't fluent in speaking. Let's continue the story. She said, trembling like a leaf, I attacked 1 month ago, in the storehouse he does. I escape. I wound wolf. He wound in head. It's an intriguing story. So, the werewolf attacked her last month, and she managed to escape and wound him in the head. And thus, when dawn broke, there was one man with a head wound, one she knew, and now he is drinking alcohol in the tavern's basement. He, I don't know, wears. A head covering? Yes, a head covering. Wears, Milo Instant wears, head. That's normal, my dear. In this weather, even the devil himself would wear a head covering. No, he. They never take off. Did you understand that part? It's an important point. Normally, shepherds drink, get drunk, and fight. But there are 5 of them who, throughout the past month, under no circumstance have ever been seen with their heads uncovered. This suspicious insistence on covering their heads sparked her suspicion. A clever idea, but there's a fact that shouldn't be forgotten, which is that the girl is crazy, completely crazy. If we overlook her beauty, her frailty, and her trembling, help me, will you? Yes, my dear, I will help you. But how can I abandon my convictions and my faith in science to put my trust in your fabricated story about a head wound, a story that might lead to the slaughter of the first poor soul who happened to bump his head on the window frame or got hit with a brick by a naughty child? He patted her shoulder reassuringly and walked her to the door, from which she left, making the sign of the cross. He went down to the tavern, the basement, and found Gustav sitting at a table with Esteban, who had become completely drunk. He sat at the same table and began to study the rough faces of the men as they laughed loudly and exchanged crude, vulgar jokes full of punches and insults. One of them is the werewolf, as she said. But which one? What names did she mention? These names don't stick in memory. And Stefano. Then Qatar. No, then Milo. One left. Esteban, of course. It's Esteban sitting at this table with us. He looked at him and studied his hairy face as he spoke with Gustav. It was completely understandable that the girl thought this man was a werewolf. He didn't need fangs and claws to be terrifying. But how did the legend of the werewolf begin? The same theme is repeated in one form or another in R.L. Stevenson's masterpiece, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, the good, respectable man who transforms under certain circumstances. Turning into a predatory devil, is this some sort of human philosophy suggesting that each of us has 2 sides, one white and one black? Is it a naive attempt to explain cases of schizophrenia where a person turns into their opposite without clear reason? In any case, the idea is terrifying, and I don't deny that for a second, and I believe that seeing Gustav transform before my eyes into a wolf-like creature would be enough to turn me into another myth without uttering a single word. It's now 5 in the evening. I approached Gustav, and the smell of alcohol from his mouth nearly killed me, and I said, Is there any way to make these men remove their head coverings? I want to see their heads uncovered. Are you crazy? First you suddenly decide to spend the night here, and now you want to see the shepherds' heads. The frost. No. My brain hasn't frozen. Please do something. Let me think. You could, for example, invite them to drink a toast and ask them to remove their hats in honor of the toast. Are you joking? We're not in a London club. These gentlemen are far from refined. Then let's bring in an icon or something sacred to force them to remove their head coverings out of respect. They don't uncover their heads even in church. Then, at that moment, stood up, staggering and holding the bottle in his hand, and said, There's an easier and more certain way, and he shouted something in Romanian. Voices of astonishment rose, and I saw all eyes looking at me with hatred, contempt, or suspicion. One of them shouted in outrage, What did you say to them, you fool? I told them exactly what you wanted without sugarcoating it. I said the gentleman from Egypt would like, with your permission, to see your heads uncovered. You idiot. He was drunk, and put me in a situation that was not only embarrassing but dangerous for my life as well. They were all looking at me with clenched fists. Some took it as an insult, some saw it as stupidity, and some thought it was a whim. One of them, no doubt, realized that I knew everything. approached me, glaring with fiery eyes. Then he slammed his fist on the table and began shouting a lot of words I could barely grasp were directed at me. Gustav said, "He says you're arrogant, rude, and a son of a—" I said it while trembling, and he says he demands an explanation. I swallowed hard, avoided the fiery gazes of the men, and said, "Tell him to sit down so I can explain, on the condition that no one else hears us." Gustav conveyed the meaning of my words to him, and he paused for a moment, eyeing us with suspicion and hatred. Then he made up his mind. He turned to the men and ordered them to do something, then pulled up his chair and sat at the table in front of me. In quick phrases, I told him what the girl had said to me in my room. And I told him that I suspected him, and that I demanded the truth be revealed before nightfall. He furrowed his brow and took a swig from Gustav's bottle, then wiped his moustache with the back of his hairy hand, and continued to stare at my face for a while, then stood up and shouted at the men at the top of his voice. A somewhat handsome young man came, his head wrapped in a filthy bandana. "Kotha!" A short, fat man rose from his seat and came to our table. Milo Instat. Milo woke up from his brief nap at the bar table and came over, adjusting his fox fur hat. George. A bearded young man came, wearing a head covering made of leather. Esteban turned to the rest of the men and said something, and tension filled the air. One of them got up to close the door, the tavern door, and the men he had called over began rolling up their sleeves. They understood that he had summoned them to tear me apart, which seemed entirely plausible to me, since all that Romanian talk might have meant, "This gentleman claims you are werewolves, so take your revenge." Turned to me and said something, then gestured for the men to sit at the table, and then began to speak in his deep voice, pressing on each word. Translated, he's retelling what you said, and he's telling them, "Comrades, the werewolf is one of the 5 sitting at this table. He is asking them to uncover their heads, and swears he will blow off the head of anyone who refuses with his rifle." And slowly, reluctantly, the men began revealing their heads. Silence filled the place, and dry throats waited anxiously for what would happen. 4 heads were uncovered. Then, with a dramatic gesture, Esteban reached for his own head covering, pulled it off, and placed it on the table. If the girl had been lying about the wound, I would have been in serious trouble. All the heads were unharmed. Only 2 heads, those of Stefano and Milo Instat, had wounds, long cuts covered by strands of hair. The men shouted in excitement, while the 2 wounded men began explaining something in panic. Of course, each was trying to explain where and how he got that wound. Esteban began to speak again. This man had a powerful presence and great influence among his people. Voices of agreement grew louder, while the 2 wounded men looked increasingly miserable. I turned to Gustav, who had been swept up in the events and was no longer translating, and asked, "Esteban says the situation has become clearer, and that we will all sit here throughout the night until one of the 2 men turns into a werewolf, and that heaven itself will decide the outcome. But how is the werewolf to be killed then? The first signs of transformation are the reddening of the pupils, and he will watch them like a hawk, waiting for the first sign from either of them. Then he will slit his throat with a silver knife before the transformation is complete." The interview. The minutes passed slowly and tediously as we sat in the tavern, gathered around Stefano and Milo Instat, both bareheaded, crying and trembling. Time passed, slowly. Suddenly someone shouted something, and everyone turned to Milo. They said his eyes had turned red. Indeed, his eyes were bloodshot. But the redness was in the conjunctiva, the white of the eyes. And this, of course, was due to excessive crying along with all the heat, smoke, and suffocating air. But that's not the pupil, it's the conjunctiva. And do you expect these shepherds to know the anatomical difference between the pupil and the conjunctiva? It's a red eye, and that's enough. The shepherds cried out enthusiastically, overcome by the thrill of the moment, while Milo froze in his seat, struck with indescribable terror, like a mouse caught in a trap, realizing there's no point in wasting its final moments resisting. I felt nauseous and on the verge of vomiting. I pulled myself together and headed to the door. Gustav called out to me, "What is it, my friend?" "Vomiting." "And the werewolf, aren't you detaining him here?" I opened the wooden door, and outside there was ice and the cold night air. I felt better, but deep inside I had a sense of regret for all that I had caused. Perhaps my foolishness would lead to a massacre. But this was the only solution I had found to save my own life from the mess caused by Gustav's recklessness. And of course it was Ekaterina's foolishness that had started this entire chain of foolish actions that would lead to Milo being slaughtered before my eyes. The noise of the men grew louder inside the tavern behind the window, and I realized I had to find a way out. But what? I don't want to see a man die because he has conjunctivitis, but how can I stop it? And then I heard a wild roar. I looked up and found myself face to face with the werewolf. Has any of you ever fallen into the clutches of a werewolf? Those who've lived through such an experience can skip this part, but for the lucky ones who haven't, I say it's a horrifying ordeal. To see in front of you a giant creature wearing human clothes, but with the face of a massive wolf, and the hands are wolf claws, and the voice. A wolf, standing on its hind legs, its eyes red like blood, its mouth open, revealing sharp white fangs, its chest heaving with a hellish growl, and this creature is attacking you! What do? You'll scream. But aren't these more like final screams than cries for help? You try to run across the slippery ice, but it's surely faster than you. You try to kick or hit it, but it's as solid as a wall. You'll fall to the ground, curling up as it crouches over you like a nightmare, its claws ripping the flesh of your face. With desperate strength, you punch it hard in its red eye, it howls and jumps off you, and in the next moment, the shepherds surround you, having rushed out from the tavern at the noise of the struggle, and the beast flees through the snow. That's exactly what happened to me. Inside the tavern, they sat me down and wiped my face with damp cloth, and handed me something in a cup, which I drank before asking what it was. Gustav wrapped his arm around my shoulder anxiously and asked, "What happened?" It was him. Belasco? Yes! Heavens, so it wasn't Milo! Did you doubt that? Then who is it? I don't know, but I gave him a fierce punch that nearly burst his left eye. Gustav turned to the shepherds and relayed my words. Relief was evident on the faces of the two accused young men, while everyone began talking excitedly. Tomorrow, of course, will be a dreadful day for anyone who took a hit or had something thrown at their left eye, but they were still eyeing me with suspicion and readiness. Esteban pointed at me and said something doubtfully. Gustav shouted at him enthusiastically, denying whatever it was. What happened? What is it, Gustav? Nothing. They're considering getting rid of you now. What? Before you kill their children? Me? How? Next month, when you turn into a werewolf. Werewolf? How? He looked at me with a meaningful expression and whispered, "He scratched your face in several places. Didn't you notice that?" But I sat in my place, listening to the debates and shouting, lost in thought. It's strange that just yesterday at this time, I knew nothing about the story of the werewolf. Isn't it odd that within 24 hours I've become so deeply entangled in the problem that I myself am now on the way to becoming a werewolf? What progress? I knew very well that the story had no truth to it, and that what I had faced outside had a scientific explanation. But the urgent problem now was dealing with these bloodthirsty madmen who wanted nothing but violence. With difficulty, despite his obvious drunkenness, Gustav managed to save my life by convincing the shepherds to wait, to show me mercy, with the assurance that next month I wouldn't be in the village or even in Romania at all, but rather back in Egypt, where the happy Nile Valley would be blessed with the legend of the werewolf. In other words, Romania would export the werewolf infection to all of Africa. That's enough excitement for one night. Slowly I stood up, and with steady steps I climbed the stairs. No one stopped me. I headed to my filthy room, took off my shoes and threw myself onto the bed, feeling it rise and fall beneath me. What a day, what a day. The door creaked open slowly. Let it be the werewolf or the devil himself. I couldn't get up or fight back. If he wants to devour me, let him do it without waking me. That's Ekaterina's soft voice. "Is there something you need, sir?" I replied with my eyes still closed. "No, my angel. No, nothing." She closed the door and left, then opened it again, poking in her small black-haired head. "Thank you. For me, sir." And she left. The bed sways beneath me. I am so exhausted. Daylight filters in through the window. I open my eyes and move my limbs, feeling the strength given to me by last night's peaceful sleep. That sleep had washed me from the inside, and now my mind is terrifyingly clear. I got up, went to the filthy wash basin, washed my face, and stole a glance at the cracked mirror. There were 2 long gashes on my left cheek, but I'm a doctor. I can't be fooled easily. Who says these gashes are the marks of a werewolf's claws? The door opened behind me, and I saw the beloved silhouette of Ekaterina carrying a tray with things that were supposedly edible. She placed it on the table behind me and turned toward me without raising her head. "This is your breakfast, sir." Her black hair hung down over her forehead, so I stood up, walked toward her, and with my fingers gently touched her small chin. She exclaimed awkwardly, "Please, no, sir, I'm not." I brushed away the lock of hair falling over her brow. That was what I was looking for. "And now, my angel, you're in a terrifying dilemma, and you're naive if you think a fallen lock of hair can hide your situation." I said in crisp English, pressing on every word, "Ekaterina, what's the reason for that bruise around your left eye?"